Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. Today we are going over our top 31 Dynasty wide receiver rankings. And it's why do rankings matter? You could just go onto a website and look at them and be like, okay, cool, that's Alfredo and Dave's rankings. But what we're going to do here is we're going to put them together, make a consensus, then put that consensus into tiers. And then when we look at the tiers, we're then going to decide who are the players that we want to be trading for, trading away. How do we feel about these players? Why do we put these players in these rankings? That's what we're here to give you guys today. And Dave, I think this is going to be a fun episode.
Yeah, I agree. I love talking dynasty rankings because it's so different. Like when we're talking redraft rankings, which we'll be doing over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, all the way up until kickoff, it's very linear. It's like, I want this player because this player is going to score more points than this player. And it's very easy to understand. With dynasty, there's so many layers to it. And, some team might behoove them to go out and target an AJ Brown. Other teams might be wanting to throw those darts on the day three wide receivers that can hit. Based on what your team looks like, there are different players you should be targeting. And I think that's what makes these conversations so much more fun. And I think it's a lot more gray than just like rebuilding and contender, because there's all the teams in the middle. And then there's, hey, maybe drafting this team switches me from being a rebuilder to a contender. Or I'm sorry, drafting this player. So there's just so much theory that goes into it that these shows are much more fun than the redraft rankings episodes that we do.
Yeah, you said behoove, and my mind just went there, and everything else went blank after you said that. I was just like, oh, dope word drop here early in the episode. It's going to be a good one. All right, so let's not waste any time. Let's hop into this. We got 31 wide receivers that we're going to be talking about. We got a whole bunch of different tiers, and very similar to our running backs episode that we did last week. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. Josh Jacobs is a buy. Let's start off with our blue chip tier. It's two wide receivers, just two guys, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. No dissension between us on these rankings here, Dave. And honestly, I don't think that anything changes unless there's some sort of career-altering thing that happens. I don't even want to say the word for Jamar Chase. I think he kind of has to remain as the wide receiver one in Dynasty. And then Justin Jefferson, my question for you here, Dave, is because I think the only question we might be able to have, which has already kind of been answered, is he quarterback proof? Does he just make the offense better and the quarterback better and the coaching staff better because he's so good at just being a one-man offense?
And I think that's the question that we don't really have an answer for. Like, what the
We
heck
kind of.
happened in Minnesota last
Right.
year? Like, is Sam Darnold actually good, or did the system and the players around Sam Darnold elevate him to something we've never seen before? We'll answer those questions this year when we see JJ McCarthy in Minnesota and Sam Darnold in Seattle. We'll kind of get a better idea of what happened in this 2024 season. But I'm a believer in Kevin O'Connell, and obviously, I don't know how you can't not be a believer in Justin Jefferson. But you look at the weapons around here: Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. You look at the system that Kevin O'Connell has built there. It's hard not to put a lot of faith into that. And it's tough breaking these players up into tiers too. I'd argue that Jamar Chase is probably in a tier of his own because he doesn't have any of the question marks of some of the other guys. Malik Neighbors, we don't know who his quarterback's going to be. Justin Jefferson, we don't know how things are going to pan out with JJ McCarthy. CeeDee Lamb, now is George Pickens in the picture, getting up there in age a little bit. Jamar Chase doesn't really have any question marks. The one maybe micro critique you could have is like, well, T. Higgins is there. Well, T. Higgins has been there since Jamar Chase has been drafted, and Jamar Chase has still produced and been just fine. So I think Chase is the clear number one. For number two, I think that's where things get interesting. You can kind of make an argument for like three or four different guys to put in that spot.
Uh, well, hold on, hold on. You can make an argument for who to put over Justin Jefferson in Dynasty?
Yeah, I think there's a strong argument for Malik Neighbors.
Oh,
CeeDee
okay.
Lamb, I think, when you look at them, they're within a year of each other and have each finished as the number one scoring wide receiver in the last couple of years. So I think you can make a strong argument to put CeeDee Lamb right alongside him, if not above him. And while I'm not there, there's a lot of people that see the production from Brian Thomas's rookie season and say that he deserves to be up there right alongside Malik Neighbors and ahead of Justin Jefferson. I've got Jefferson as my wide receiver too, but I think that once you get past Jamar Chase at number one, I think the next five or six guys are pretty close.
Oh, they're definitely really close. I'm just when you say there's an argument to be had for people that would put other wide receivers over Justin Jefferson at two, I just simply don't talk to those people. So I would just walk away, and just Jefferson remains wide
Well,
receiver
then
2 here in
let's
Dynasty.
skip right over
Let's
Malik
go.
Neighbors and not talk about him at all then because I
Well,
don't want to ruin our friendship.
no. So let's go to this next tier. Tier number 2.
Yeah.
Just very lovingly called them the other guys because I think they are also blue chip players, but not the blue chip players here. Dave might have something different to say. So at 3, we've got Malik Neighbors. At 4, CeeDee Lamb. And at 5, Puka Nakua. And I mean, Malik Neighbors, you talk about him being a guy that could be wide receiver 2 in this. And I wonder because it feels like maybe in his rookie year we saw worst case scenario. But I also kind of feel the same way about Justin Jefferson, that we saw worst case scenario. But both of these guys are now in offensive situations where it could actually, in fact, get worse. We
Right.
don't know what's going to happen with JJ McCarthy. We don't really know how good Russell Wilson's going to be for this Giants offense. Like he's been helpful for wide receivers at times, but he's never. Dave, does Russell Wilson strike you as a guy that's going to put Malik Neighbors over the top, or does it kind of all hinge on Jackson Dart becoming that quarterback?
I think it's Jackson Dart. I mean, if you're betting on Russell Wilson long term, don't feel too great about that. But that
Right.
being said, we have seen Russell Wilson provide prolific seasons for Doug Baldwin and Golden Tate and Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. So we know he's got that. Can he do it now at this point in his career? I'm not quite as certain. But I think the Jackson Dart is what I get excited about, is that if he can pan out, whether it be late in the season this year or going into year 2, but really what it comes down to is just Malik Neighbors, the prospect himself, still just 21 years old. So you're getting, an extra 4 years from Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or any of those other guys. And last year he set the all-time target share record for rookies and also led the NFL. 34.9% target share is just a ludicrous number. Like that's like what prime DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Adams was putting up. Just insane usage in that offense. He was second in the league in targets per route run, 170 targets as a rookie. For me, when I see that usage is something I want to bet on. Touchdowns and big plays, that is fluky and hard to replicate year over year. But typically, when we see guys that are drawing usage like this, that is going to stick for years to come. So Malik Neighbors, still just 21 years old, already drawing targets at a more obscene rate than anybody else in the NFL. I think that's why I don't have it ranked this way. But if somebody did have Malik Neighbors over Justin Jefferson, I think it's totally justified.
So I want to look at usage and say that that's a thing that will drive. And we're splitting hairs here. You've got Malik Neighbors at wide receiver 3. I've got him at wide receiver 4. When I see usage, especially high target volume, I want to say, okay, that's a good indicator of future success. But what has changed in that offense, and how much could this usage change? Right. So it's did the Giants go out and change their quarterback? Yes, 3 times over. Do they have a long-standing head coach that's going to be there for the future? Maybe, maybe not. Have they added more to the backfield, more pass catching running backs? Cam Scatterbo, okay, sure. So like there's a very high probability that Malik Neighbors keeps that same usage that he had from last year, but there's enough there to make me question it. Like, could we? I'm not going to question the talent whatsoever. I just don't want to see another Garrett Wilson situation. That's the only thing that makes me go, I'll keep CeeDee Lamb ahead of him. That's it.
And still, I
That's the
mean,
only
we'll
thing.
we'll talk about Garrett Wilson, but I still think you keep making those bets on Garrett Wilson, and it's tough now because he's
Sure.
going into year 4. But I think Drake London is the example of why you want to bet on a guy that is pulling this sort of usage. And of course, Malik Neighbors had just as good of a season as a rookie as Drake London did in year 3. But Drake London, we saw it his rookie season. He's 5th in the league in target share, 29.4%. But the production wasn't there. And then in year 2, he had great target share, but the production wasn't there. And then in year 3, Kirk Cousins comes into the picture. Michael Penix looks great down the stretch. And we finally see Drake London break out for over 1,200 yards. He gives us a top 10 wide receiver finish. So I think that, well, not that I think, we know that usage is pretty sticky year over year for wide receivers. A guy who's drawing an obscene target rate is typically going to get a similar target rate for the coming years. And that's the excitement for me with Malik Neighbors. I mean, you can basically just ink this guy down for a 30% plus target share every single year going forward. And there's so many ways that this could break. Maybe
That's
Russell Wilson
heavy.
just rewinds the clock. Maybe Jackson Dart is good. Maybe Jackson Dart sucks and they decide to bring in a new quarterback next year that is a good quarterback. There's so many different ways that it can break. I think you just bet on the talent and hope that the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. Like once again, we're not far off. I've got him at 4. You
Right.
got him at 3. CeeDee Lamb is a guy that we have right now at 4. You have him at, so the consensus is at 4. You've got him at 5. I have him at 3. For me, I think the thing is just CeeDee Lamb is once again, we know he's a volume machine, but we also know that he can score touchdowns. We also know he's productive with the ball in his hands. We know that he's part of a good offense. I think there's a misconception that people think that the Cowboys are going to be running the ball a ton under Brian Schottenheimer, and that has not always been the case, especially when he has led the offense there. Dak has had some of his best years under Schottenheimer, and given their backfield situation, it doesn't really strike me as a high volume backfield with Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, and Jaden Blue over there. So I'm still good with CeeDee Lamb. I think just being tied to Dak Prescott keeps him in my top 3. But I want to ask this, Dave, because you had in your article that you did, where you had your dynasty tiers, you had CeeDee Lamb in your blue chip tier up with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But here he's your wide receiver 4. Why the distinction where he's going to be in that blue chip tier, but the ranking speaks differently?
Yeah, I mean, all of these guys, it's hard not to lump these 3 players together. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. Their birthdays are all within 1 year of each other. If you look at over the last 3
Birthday
years,
bros, nice.
yes, and in 2022, Justin Jefferson was the highest scoring wide receiver. In 2023 was CeeDee Lamb, and in 2024 was Jamar Chase. So all 3 of these guys have literally been the wide receiver 1 for the last 3 seasons. But then when I got down to the next year, where it was Malik Neighbors by himself, I said it's really hard to fit him in a bucket with anybody else because his usage was better than the blue chips, his production wasn't, and he's significantly younger than all of these guys. So I think you could fold him in anywhere inside that tier. I put him up at number 2, but if you want to put him down at 4, I think that's totally okay. But then Puka Nacua is the other guy in this tier that also is kind of hard to fit with anybody else. One, you look at everybody else: Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Malik Neighbors. They are all first-round picks. Puka Nacua is a day 3 pick. What we saw from Puka Nacua in his rookie season was one of the best rookie seasons of all time. You can't forget, 35 targets in his first 2 games. But then last year, there were injury concerns that we just can't ignore. So I'm still holding it down for Puka Nacua. I've got him even higher than CeeDee Lamb. I don't know what his consensus ranking is right now. Yeah, all the way down at wide receiver 7. That's kind of shocking to me. I
Yeah,
think
that's
that,
interesting.
yeah, with these day 3 wide receivers, they just don't have any value insulation. Like if CeeDee Lamb were to come out last year and be injured for a lot of the year and have a down season, his value wouldn't budge. But because Puka Nacua doesn't have that first round draft capital, he
That's
doesn't have the value insulation, and injuries
that's
cause him to
weird.
slide.
That's
It's just the
weird.
way it is.
That's weird. 2 very productive years, being good in fantasy, being good for real football. I I don't know, man. Like I don't see it as like someone's looking at Puka Nacua right now and going, yeah, but he was drafted in day 3 of the NFL draft. I look at it more as they see like, well, Matt Stafford's old and maybe has 1 year left, and they just added Devontae Adams. Like to me, those are the real concerns that are on the surface that you can just easily see. I think I'm going to be real with you, Dave. I think that's a little bit of the dynasty brain rot of like a lot of those guys that are deep in the dynasty trenches are like, yeah, but day 3 wide receiver. The spreadsheets say.
I
I'm
mean,
just not thinking.
what other reason would we have to take a guy who had the most prolific rookie season
The
of
2
all
reasons I
time?
just said, Stafford and Devontae Adams. There's
I don't think that's a reason
uncertainty.
to knock him down. I think that if you look just at the age and production, Puka Nacua should be up in that top 5, but I truly think it's day 3. We see this with Amon St. Brown. His
That's gross.
dynasty value fluctuates so much. People just you don't get that same value insulation from a day 3 wide receiver that you get from these guys that have the flawless profiles where they check that round 1 box.
Well, I'm gonna talk about that next guy you just mentioned here as we go to the next tier. But let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? Does the day 3 draft value stuff really hold water after a player has been so successful in the league, particularly guys like Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown? Let's go to our next
And
tier
let the
here.
record show, Puka Nacua is my wide receiver 4. I'm not buying into this
I,
thought. I'm just saying
yeah,
I think that's why the consensus is lower on Puka.
I honestly think you're galaxy braining that. I just think it's a Devonte Adams thing and Stafford thing. But let's go to the next here and I'll be curious to see what people say in the comments here on YouTube. Which, by the way, if you're watching, take a sec to like this video, comment down below with your thoughts, where you've got players ranked as well, who players you might be trading for. We do our best to answer each of those questions. And if you're listening over on the audio side on Apple or Spotify, the most helpful thing that you can do is to leave a review. If it's 5 stars, it better be 5 stars. We will thank you so much. It means a lot to us. You know, this show, it thrives off of you guys, the viewers, the listeners, the fan base. You guys are amazing, and we love you. All right. You guys are in tier number 1, by the way. Just wanted to say that. All right, tier 3. These are the locked in wide receiver ones. And let's go through this. This is numbers 6 through 11. At 6, we got Brian Thomas Jr. At 7, Nico Collins. 8, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Number 9, Drake London. 10, Ladd McConkey. And 11, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Dave, we have, honestly, for all the conversations we're having, we have very little dissension in our rankings here.
Yeah.
And same thing kind of happened here throughout this tier. These guys are just, they're all locked in wide receiver ones. You mentioned the whole thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown's value changing and going up and down. And I think that's another guy that I don't necessarily look at it as him being the day 3 guy, because he's like 2 picks away or 3 picks away from being a day 2 guy when he was drafted. I think a lot of it has to do with that emergence of Jameson Williams. I think it has to do with that loss of Ben Johnson. Like there was a lot of things that were going on there, but we both still have him as a top 9 wide receiver. You have him at 9. I have him at 8. Listen, if there's a
consensus value right now is at wide receiver 7. And the crazy thing, it was wide receiver 3 to start the year. And then he finishes the wide receiver 3 and still fell to wide receiver 7.
I think it's Ben Johnson, man. I think it's Ben Johnson. It's him leaving. Like if nothing changed except Ben Johnson leaving, I'm more likely to say, oh, it's your very famous and very beloved offensive coordinator leaving the team versus like, yeah, but remember he was drafted in round 4. Like I'm not sure that I see that.
I'm sure that has something to do with it as well, Ben Johnson leaving, but this is just, we see this all the time with day 3 wide receivers. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is younger than Justin Jefferson. And over the last 2 years, he has performed almost exactly the same as Justin Jefferson. Last year, on a per game basis, they were 0.4 points apart from each other. Justin Jefferson, despite losing Sam Darnold, still holding it down as a consensus wide receiver too. Mm-hmm. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he loses his offensive coordinator, he's going to fall all the way to wide receiver 7. That's just
also expectation. Is it expectation? Because I feel like going into last year, whether it was fantasy or dynasty, everyone was really nervous about Justin Jefferson, and then he overperformed expectations, whereas everyone was super high on Amon-Ra, and then I guess to some degree he underperformed. I don't quite know how to say that with a straight face. Right. I know. Like I don't know how to say that with a straight face, but like I think that's what we do. Like there's so much psychology to dynasty rankings, which is why like we'll sit here and say, yeah, we have this guy at 8 and 9 and we're defending him. Yet the consensus has him at 7, and it feels like we're too high on him, but we're actually both too low on St. Brown.
I think the real thing with St. Brown, though, is that he saw a pretty big dip in both usage and production last year, but he was able to make up for that with touchdowns, higher touchdown rate than he's ever had in his career. But his per game yardage dropped by 20 yards per game last year from what we saw in 2023, which is pretty significant. Targets per game went down a little bit as well. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, definitely not a guy that I'm sounding the alarms for by any means. But again, going back to the draft capital, he just doesn't have that same floor that other guys that are productive as he is. If they come out this year and Jameson Williams is beating Amon-Ra St. Brown in targets and fantasy production, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to fall to wide receiver 20 almost immediately, because people have been waiting for this to happen, because they said 3 years ago when Jameson Williams was drafted, well, he's going to take over for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It hasn't happened yet, but people want to make that switch so badly so they can say that they were right in their pre-draft takes, that I think that we are another slow season with this usage that we saw. Another big thing too, Ben Johnson, he talks about how his passing offense is predicated around the slot receiver. Alfredo, back from the Miami days, he talks about how Danny Amendola and Jarvis Landry were the engines that powered that passing attack, carried that over into Detroit, where we saw Amon-Ra St. Brown consistently being one of the highest targeted players in the league. With him out of the picture now, a new offensive coordinator might say the slot isn't that important to me. I'd rather get the ball to our X receiver, Jameson Williams, or get the ball to Sam Laporta, our in-breaking tight end. There are other options here, and I do worry that Ben Johnson being out of the picture does pull back that target share a bit.
So then who is the safest wide receiver out of this bunch? For those listening, I'm going to repeat them. Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Ladd McConkey, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Who do you think is most likely to retain their dynasty value over the next, let's call it 2 seasons?
My answer here might surprise you. I'm gonna go with Lad McConkey, though. What we saw
Hmm.
from Lad McConkey over the second half of his rookie season was unbelievable, and I lumped him in as a top 10 wide receiver. I'm not sure. I think you're there too. Yeah, we both have him as our wide receiver 10. And again, it just comes down to the usage. Over the second half of the season, we saw a huge boom from what he saw in the first half. He started moving around the formation more, playing out of more than just the slot. He started running routes deeper downfield. His A dot jumped, but 8.3 targets, 6.4 receptions, and 98.9 yards per game from week 11 onward. And that's not including his 197-yard and a touchdown game against the Texans in the playoffs. I think he has just cemented himself as the wide receiver one there. And even me, a Trey Harris lover, expects Trey Harris to be the complementary piece to Lad McConkey. I think that the target share we saw, being tied to Justin Herbert, being tied to Jim Harbaugh, not having any competition for his skill set, I think he's the guy over the next 3 years that's going to be the safest asset.
I think you meant to say that Trey Harris is going to be the complementary piece to Quentin Johnston.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. Yes.
Yeah, I'm intrigued because I think there's multiple questions that can be had here and asked and answered, which is just who's going to retain that value, but who actually has that potential to shoot up in value even more. And I think you can look at all of these younger guys like the Drake Londons, Lad McConkey's,
Yeah.
JSNs because of everything that they're doing with volume. But I think there's a guy here who not only gets the volume, but gets the explosive plays and gets the touchdowns and is going to be tied to a good quarterback for essentially the next 4 years. And for me, it's Nico Collins, who we both put as our wide receiver 7. And I know that everything I was saying there almost sounded like it'd be Brian Thomas Jr., but it's Nico Collins. And I think that he is honestly just one good season away from being in that same tier with Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua. You go back and look at last season. He's pulling down 8, 9, 10, 11 targets in various games. He was good for almost a touchdown in every single game. And that was with healthy Tank Dell at the time. And that was with Dalton Schultz pulling in targets. And that was with a commitment to the run game and a struggling CJ Stroud. Now, hopefully, let's give us a good CJ Stroud. Like, let's get Jaden Higgins out there, taking defenders away. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a huge disparity in targets going down. I think Nico Collins has established himself as the guy that CJ Stroud's just going to keep going to. So that's one that I'm interested in seeing where his value goes over the next year.
Yeah, I'm a big Nico Collins fan. I mean, he's 26, so that will put a soft cap on how much his value can grow, but he could absolutely be the most productive guy from this year. We kind of glossed over Brian Thomas, haven't talked about him a ton. I feel like by default, you kind of have to put him in as wide receiver 6. Like any lower than that just feels
Yeah, he's de
disrespectful.
facto. Yeah. I
And I do
almost put
want
him at 7 behind Nico.
yeah, and I get it. I mean, they're very similar players. When you look at Brian Thomas's rookie season, though, the usage does concern me just a little bit. A lot of his production came late in the season with Mac Jones, which was kind of weird. But the usage, I talk so much about Malik Neighbors and why I want to bet on Malik Neighbors because of that 35% target share. Brian Thomas's was nowhere close to that. He was outside of the top 20 in target share, outside of the top 20 in targets per route run. So much of his production came from big plays and touchdowns, which is awesome. Obviously, in fantasy football, we love big plays and we love touchdowns. But those production profiles remind me a little bit more of guys like DK Metcalf and George Pickens. And you can see a lot of variance in year to year production when guys are, you know, built around making big plays and touchdowns. Now with Travis Hunter in the picture, I don't see any opportunity where he can grow his target share all that much. I think Travis Hunter is probably the wide receiver 1 here on a target basis. Granted, those targets are going to be lower value. I think they'll come more in the short areas of the field, across the middle of the field, yards after the catch, and things like that. But I think when you look at Travis Hunter showing up, where there was almost no competition for touches last year, now Travis Hunter is going to come in and take 25 to 30% of the touches. Could be complimentary, and the underneath stuff could open up even more big plays for Brian Thomas Jr. But I think ceiling wise, it's there with Brian Thomas Jr. But I think the floor here is something that dynasty managers should be aware of, because if he comes out again with a similar target share and he's playing second fiddle to Travis Hunter, I could see him quickly starting to fall down dynasty ranks.
Listen, I like the talent of Brian Thomas Jr., but everything you said is a very reasonable concern about his profile. And adding Travis Hunter, I think, is one of the biggest detractors to his value, and was why I was willing to maybe put him at wide receiver 8 behind Nico and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
But the youth, the talent, everything that's there, like, it's hard to just deny those things. I would say this, though, is that since they're all in that same tier, that's probably the kind of guy that I'm looking at trading away, because I think there are going to be people in your leagues that look at him and say he's in the same tier as Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, and there's going to be a lot of mispriced value on a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. And I think the further you get away from this NFL draft, right, and the Travis Hunter hype, the higher that price is going to go back up. I think right now is probably the wrong time to do it because there's a lot of Travis Hunter talk, but starting to see how some of those rumors. There was the most ridiculous rumor yesterday I was seeing on one of the social media platforms that Travis Hunter's dropping balls in 11 on 11s.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay.
Slipping in and out of his breaks. I saw that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's struggling with route running. Travis Hunter struggles to run routes. Okay, maybe now's the time. Maybe now's the time. Go and sell Brian Thomas. Maybe go buy Travis Hunter. I don't know, but it feels like it's gonna be very narrative driven, and that'll be the time to do those things.
And I'm looking right now. I talked about being a little bit higher on Puka Nacua than the consensus, and talking about the shaky floor with Brian Thomas Jr. here. What is the gap between Brian Thomas Jr. and Puka Nacua? Because if I have Brian Thomas Jr. and I could trade him for Puka Nacua and a late second, I think I'd doing that. I mean, I'm definitely doing that. I've got Puka Nacua ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. in my rankings, and right now market value prefers Brian Thomas Jr. I think that's a great opportunity where you can trade down for a guy with a similar age, a guy who has 2 years of production, a guy who has drawn targets at an elite rate. I would much prefer Puka Nacua over Brian Thomas, and you can probably get a cherry on top if you're the one making that deal.
Maybe you can get like a little Travis Etienne cherry. Who knows?
Maybe.
People are just giving him away at this point, which is
seriously.
Did you see his ADP right now? By the way, in best ball drafts, that Bashal Tutin is going way
and Tank Bigsby,
ahead
I believe.
So it's Tutin, Etienne, Bigsby, but Etienne and Bigsby, I think Etienne was like running back 38, and Bigsby was like 42, but then Tutin was up at like 28. Like, that's crazy. Anyways, this is a wide receiver episode. We'll keep talking about wide receivers. Let's go to the next tier here. And it's going to be wide receivers 12 through 19. This is a wide receiver that I just called lots of potential, because there's lots of potential for these guys. And at 12, we've got Travis Hunter. At 13, AJ Brown. 14, Marvin Harrison Jr., who apparently has just been doing nothing but eating protein for the last 6 months. At 15, Tet McMillan. At 16, T. Higgins. 17, Garrett Wilson. 18, Rashee Rice, and at 19, Rome Odunze. So, Dave, we have some dissension here in our rankings, and I don't want to have to go one by one through each of these players. We've got a 4-spot difference on Travis Hunter, 4-spot difference on Tet McMillan, and a lot of that is you valuing youth more than I do, and then me valuing what I think to be good situations, where I have T. Higgins ranked 3 spots higher, Marvin Harrison Jr. 2 spots higher. These aren't huge disparities, but we have a difference in almost every single ranking in this tier. So what's your philosophy here on looking at potential versus production? Because we can sit here and look at guys like T. Higgins, AJ Brown, Rashee Rice even, and say, okay, these are guys that have given us production. But would I rather have the mystery box of Tet McMillan, Rome Odunze, some of these other guys that have the potential?
I definitely would. I'm always just trying to get on the right side of the age curve with players. And when I see AJ Brown going into his age 28 season, he's been in Philadelphia for 3 years now, and that per game usage has dipped a little bit every single year. Now, not dramatic. I'm talking like 3 yards per year going down, but it's not often that you see a guy at 28, 29, 30 years old turn it around. I mean, yeah, we saw it with Terry McLaurin last year. Outliers exist, but if I'm able to take an AJ Brown and trade him for another player inside of this tier, and presumably, get some extra on top, I would do that. Like Tet McMillan right now. Teteroa McMillan. I'm sorry. He doesn't like being called Tet.
Oh, that's right. T-Mac. My bad.
Yeah,
My bad.
T-Mac or Teteroa. No more.
If you're
Tet
watching
McMillan.
or listening, Teteroa, I'm sorry. I apologize.
But like, I would take AJ Brown, trade down, get Teteroa McMillan and another pick, and I would be more than happy with that. Now, does that assuredly mean that Teteroa McMillan is going to give me AJ Brown production? No. But if he does, I'm getting an extra 5 years of shelf life inside the age curve that we want to, or inside the age window that we want to see. And I think it's just good process. So I think T. Higgins is still young enough that you know what you're getting, and his value isn't going to fall. He's in a great situation. We've seen him be productive alongside Jamar Chase. I don't think it's late enough that you need to move off of him immediately, but it's going to be a lot harder to move him 2 years from now than it would be to move him now. So he's another player that if I could trade back and get a Garrett Wilson, a Rashi Rice, or a younger guy, I'm definitely trying to do that.
I think what's so funny about Dynasty is that a lot of what we're constantly doing is trying to buy the dip, sell high, make moves, get yourself in a good position. But typically, all of that is get yourself in a good position so that you can get young players and not have to worry about that position again. And it seems like such a like snake eating its tail thing that we're just going in that cycle nonstop of like constantly make trades so that you don't have to make trades, but still keep making trades. Like that's where Dynasty is, and I think for some people, it's probably where it gets to be a little exhausting. If we're just being real,
Yeah.
like there's plenty of people that just give up on Dynasty, on leagues, or they'll give up on a month at a time and then just come back later when it's time for the rookie draft or something like that. It is why I think I tend to lean more towards I'll take, like, for example, I have T. Higgins ranked ahead of sorry, I was trying to look here. I have T. Higgins ranked 5 spots ahead of Roma Dunze. You have T. Higgins ranked 1 spot ahead of Roma Dunze. To me, I'd much rather, like by a 5-player gap, have the T. Higgins production and the T. Higgins quarterback and everything that I know is there versus whatever Roma Dunze could be, even though he's younger. And I think like that's just becomes the example of preference. And so much of this is talking to your league mates and finding out what their preferences are. Because I think you and I would probably in most cases be great trade partners because we have enough of a difference on things where, okay, this trade makes sense. Like if I wanted to trade you Roma Dunze for T. Higgins right now, would you do it, Dave?
I'd want a little something on top just to play the market values a
Sure, I'll
little
give you
bit.
a
I'd
fourth.
probably ask. I'd ask for a third round pick on top is what I'd ask. I don't put any value
2029
in
third
fourth
round
round
pick.
picks.
Done.
But I mean, that's what I've played Dynasty long enough that I know a lot of people are going to say this and like, why would I get rid of AJ Brown? Why would I get rid of these players? They're still productive. But if you want to build a true juggernaut, a team that is just going to win year after year after year and nobody is going to be able to take them down, what you need to do is keep taking shots on young players and you get as many rookie draft picks as you can because some of those rookie draft picks are going to be worthless. Some of them are going to be a fifth round Puka Nakua and a fourth round Kyron Williams and a fourth round Amon St. Brown. So I think that when you are trying to rebuild and when you're trying to play dynasty and when you're trying to set up for success for the long term, the best thing you could do is get out from under players before they fall into the age curve, bring in younger players that have upside and bring in as many rookie picks as possible so you increase your chances on hitting on one of those league tilting young players.
Let's go to the next tier. This is called good, not great. And this is wide receivers 20 through 25. At 20, we've got Devontae Smith. 21, Zay Flowers. 22, Jalen Waddle. 23, DJ Moore. 24, Emeka Egbuka. 25, Chris Olave. And with all due respect to Emeka Egbuka, we don't know if
Yeah.
he's not great. He
Just kind of gets lumped in here.
yeah, he gets lumped in there. And honestly, plenty of these players have been great at times in their careers. Like, let's not get it twisted. It's just the name of a tier. So we're not trying to be insulting here. But for the most part, a lot of these guys are either number 2s on their team or they are ones with enough target competition around them or enough warts where you're saying, okay, maybe they just don't necessarily deserve to be a top 12 in dynasty value. And Dave, I think at the top is where you and I have the most dissension between Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle, and it's like 2 picks off,
2
2
spots.
players
Yeah.
off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's nothing crazy. I almost start to look at this and I wonder, does this become the undervalued tier to buy into? Because some of these guys are still very young. Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Chris Olave. I mean, Emeka Egbuka is obviously a rookie, and I don't think anyone's
Right.
trading away a rookie, but from all these guys, they're all still pretty young. We more or less know what they are. So the ceiling is probably capped. But I think because we know what they are, and because the dynasty manager that has them on their roster knows what they are, the price is pretty much set at what it is, and that becomes a little less enticing to people. So you can probably get them for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, and all of these guys actually fit in a bucket that I had in my recent article that is just wide receiver 2s atop the age curve. I mean, they're not old, but they're not young. But I think that this, I'm sure you recognize it, Alfredo, but every player in this tier is a former first round pick in the
Yeah.
NFL draft. And I think this is why you want to invest in these first round picks. You know, we know, and I just talked about how you can turn those fourth and fifth round picks into league tilting players. But at the end of the day, the NFL is a lot better at scouting players than I think people realize. And these are the guys that maybe they're like our post hype sleepers. You know, at one point we hoped Devonta Smith coming off a Heisman win, we were like, he could be the best wide receiver in football. Didn't pan out that way. Still a top 20 dynasty wide receiver. Zay Flowers, first round pick, has looked great so far in Baltimore, and we're excited to buy into that profile. Jalen Waddle, you know, hasn't been great either, considering where he was drafted. The wide receiver two in his class behind only Jamar Chase hasn't come close to the production we've seen from Jamar Chase, but still, three straight 1,000-yard seasons to start his career, and now Tyreek Hill's aging out and he could take over. So this is why I just want to get as many first round receivers as I can in my rookie drafts, because these guys retain value. And of course, you do have the busts, the Quentin Johnstons and the N'Keal Harrys and the Kevin Whites, but more often than not, you're either getting a high end range of outcomes where these guys are going to be elite dynasty assets. And if they don't pan out to be elite dynasty assets, they're still going to be serviceable wide receiver twos for 5+ years.
I think the most intriguing player on this, because I think his value is most volatile, becomes Chris
DJ
Olave.
Moore. Oh,
Oh
all right.
no, Chris Olave,
I was gonna
because
say I could see DJ Moore, the value really falling out from Hunter in this year if he
it
ends up taking a
could,
back seat to a Dunze and Burden.
but that's something where I think it's like we've already lost a little bit of that value because of the draft, and I think that would be a thing that happens gradually. Like
Oh,
I, I
he's 28. I think it would fall out from under
I'm
him
I'm
if
talking
he
about
if,
throughout the season.
oh
Like we're
yeah,
not going
yeah,
to walk
yeah.
into the first 3 weeks of the season and be like, well, damn, DJ Moore is fourth on the target list, and he's totally been phased out of the offense. Like I don't know if that happens. There's a small likelihood it happens, but Chris Olave is the one that sticks out to me because of the injuries. It's been the concussions, repeated concussions. It's the
Mhm.
quarterback change. It's the coaching change, and honestly, it's just a team that's not very good, and they're kind of strapped with what their roster is and what it can be. And then you have that emergence of Rashid Shaheed last year that everyone's just been kind of waiting for. The Chris Olave thing is just strikes me as very intriguing. Where I almost ask myself, do I want to buy the dip or do I just want to stay away from this dip?
I think I'm happy buying Chris Olave, just because he is so cheap at this point, and I think there is still room to grow.
What do you think it
I
is?
think
What's the cost?
I mean, what you're probably
Do you
getting
think
him
it's like a high
for an
second?
early second. Yeah, that's kind of where my mind went immediately. I mean, he's
I mean,
still,
I'd be sending out like 27 seconds right now.
yeah,
20
yeah.
26 seconds, I guess.
If that gets it done, I'd do it for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, he's still. I think there was also the narrative when he was drafted that he was a late breakout and that he was an older player, but he's still young. I mean, he's 24 years old. He's going to be going into his age 25 season, but we regularly see guys don't even hit their peak until they're 27 years old. And then it's not this fall off with running backs where they just like are, suddenly completely phased out of the picture. We kind of see this slow, gradual decline. So my guess with Chris Olave is that you're still getting 3 to 4 years of the production we've seen over the last few years, which when healthy has been very, very good. And
Yeah.
if not, uh, yeah, I think Chris Olave is a good buy. I think you're still looking at 5+ years of production from him.
I'm curious. Do you happen to have I know people hate it. Do you happen to have Keep Trade Cut open somewhere?
I do, yeah.
What's his value at right now with Keep Trade
Wide
Cut?
receiver 26 on Keep Trade Cut, and it shows that he
Okay.
has moved down 5 spots in recently as Emeka Egbuka and DK Metcalf and Matthew Golden, others are climbing.
Guys, we are one Tyler Shuck video away from that value going way down or way
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Like it's one silly training camp hype video of either a duck hitting the ground or a beautiful bomb and that value changing a ton. Like that's just the reality of it.
I think the big issue with Olave would be injury. Granted, a lot of his injuries thus far have been fluky, they're concussions. But if he comes out and sustains any sort of injury this year that causes him to miss multiple games, I think that'll really cause the dynasty markets to sour on him. But regardless, he's a talented player, and he's one of the guys that we'd look at. His career has been disappointing thus far, based on what he was expected to be when he was drafted. Still holding it down as wide receiver 26 in Dynasty. And I think that's why you want to invest in these first round wide receivers, because all it takes is a taste. If they just show some flashes on the field in their first couple of years, they're going to retain that value.
Let's go down to the next tier, the final tier that we have here, and this is wide receivers 26 through 31. and I lovingly named this tier. They exist because mostly I couldn't think of a name, and that's what these guys they do exist. Like they are in the NFL. 26, DK Metcalf. That's gonna be such a fun one to watch this year, man. Because like I don't know that he's going to be very good, or what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, or what's going to happen if the Steelers are going to be very good. I know DK Metcalf as a player is good, but that'll be interesting to see where the fantasy value goes. At 27, Brandon
Are we
Ayuk.
even sure Aaron Rodgers is going to be there?
I don't know. He has the opportunity to do the funniest thing and just retire. And then
I
the
think he
Steelers
might.
are running it back with Mason Rudolph throwing a DK Metcalf. Like,
Mhm.
that would just be so funny.
I think it might
I,
be happening. I mean, there's a reason he hasn't signed yet, right? Like it is May, and I know he's working out with the
I
team
think
and
he
doing
just
all these things. But if he really wanted to play, he'd put a pen to a paper by now. You'd think.
I think he just likes the attention. I think he likes the
I
attention.
too.
I think he wants to play, but he wants to play under his own terms. Like remember last year he was on the Jets, and where was he in like Africa or Egypt or something? Like
Yeah, I
during
can't even remember. Yeah.
during a mandatory practice, and it was
Hmm.
just like, nah, this has been on my schedule. You guys didn't get my calendar invite. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? So yeah, I don't know. I just don't think he cares. Okay, back to this. 26 was DK Metcalf. 27, Brandon Ayuk. 28, Xavier Worthy. 29, Jamison Williams. 30, Ricky Pearsall. And at 31, Terry McLaurin. And Dave, you and I are considerably lower on Xavier Worthy than the rest of consensus. And I know you mentioned that it was the same thing on the Dynasty show with Jeff Bell, but I mean, even just consensus rankings and the Keep Trade Cut crowdsourcing rankings there, Xavier Worthy is much, much higher. And I think we see this all the time
Yeah.
with players where they have a hot end of the year and we hold on to that. And context be damned of how it happened, but it happened. And honestly, given where the crowd has Xavier Worthy and where we have him, to me, that is just the screaming sell because of what you're getting back in return. He's still a good player. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying he's in a bad situation, but there's a chance that he gets relegated to being the second or third target on this team. And I don't know how valuable that truly is.
Yeah, I think you do want to not ignore late season breakouts. Like I talked about it, Lad McConkey had a late
Just
season breakout.
contextualize him.
Yeah, but Amon St. Brown. I mean, I remember after his rookie season trying to contextualize that, saying, well, T.J. Hawkinson was hurt, and DeAndre Swift got hurt, and that's when his usage ticked up, and he, ended up becoming Amon St. Brown. Brandon Ayuk in this same exact tier was another guy who didn't do anything the first half of his rookie season, and then tore it up over the final 6 weeks or whatever it was. So you don't want to ignore that, but I just don't think Xavier Worthy is that good. He was really like just the last man standing. Travis Kelsey just fell face first off the age cliff last year. Rashi Rice got injured. Marquise Brown got injured. Juju Smith-Schuster got injured. DeAndre Hopkins was completely washed. Isaiah Pacheco was injured. I mean, every single weapon on this team was injured. And the one thing that just keeps standing out to me is that he had one game last year with over 100 yards. Like played the entire season, and that one single game with over 100 yards came in the Super Bowl, and over half of those yards came on an FU throw from Patrick Mahomes when they were down 3 scores in the final few minutes. So this is a guy who was the number one receiver for Patrick Mahomes for over half the season and couldn't even eclipse 100 yards in a regular season game. That is very concerning to me. And you start looking at the fantasy points per route run and the yards per target and the yards per route run, all of the efficiency metrics that we care about. Xavier Worthy was terrible. Like I'm talking like 70, 80, 90, 100th among wide receivers. He was not an efficient player last year. He was forced volume. So yeah, we've got him as our consensus wide receiver 29, I believe, on Keep Trade Cut right now. He's the wide receiver 22. So definitely a sell for me if you can get anything for that value. And then there's some people that value, I mean, even higher than wide receiver 22. I'm just not really seeing it there.
I mean, let's just put the name to the value here. Xavier Worthy or Roma Dunze.
Odunze,
I
definitely. You're talking about a top 10 pick in the draft on an improved offense as opposed to a guy who is the last pick of the draft who now has added target competition. That's an easy one.
uh, Same team. Xavier Worthy or Rasheed Rice.
Oh, I've got Rasheed Rice way
We
ahead of
both
Xavier
do.
Worthy. We
We
kind of
both do.
glossed over his name, but he's probably one of the most intriguing buys in Dynasty right
Hmm.
now, depending on your risk tolerance.
Xavier Worthy really had it wasn't even like a deep stretch towards the end of the season. It was like a 3-game stretch where he had a heavy target volume because of the lack of weapons around and touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns in his final 2 games of the season. Yeah, that'll
Also,
do it.
he's not a deep threat. Like, he's not Tyreek Hill like people think that he is. His touches came on these like short, manufactured, gimmicky plays. Like, he could not reel in the deep targets when they would try to hit him
They
deep.
kind of
So
wanted him to do the Rashee Rice thing, and he can't do that.
right, he's like too small to be Rashi Rice, and he isn't good enough at tracking balls to be Tyreek Hill. I don't know. I don't see it with Xavier Worthy.
It's timing's everything. Timing is everything with these guys because not only is it end of the year, but it was specifically fantasy championship week and
Right.
fantasy semifinals
Yep.
week where he had his
Recency
2
bias.
biggest games. So there's that recency bias. If he helped you win your fantasy championship, your dynasty championship, whichever, you'll love him. You'll love him, and he's got a special place in your heart. But you also need to be willing to say goodbye. Let the little bird fly away. Let the bird leave the nest. Because I look at some of these other players on here, and I don't necessarily say that they are better buys, but
Ricky Pearsall is.
I'm more intrigued by them. I'm way more intrigued by Ricky Pearsall, and that's my favorite guy from this tier. Like, I'm a big Jameson Williams guy, but with Ben Johnson not being there in Detroit, I'm curious what's going to be happening there. Ricky Pearsall is the guy to me that has the
I was just going to say the ceiling for Jameson Williams
could be
because
huge.
we've been able to contextualize all of his struggles, drafted coming off an ACL tear, then the suspension. There's already so much concern about Detroit and what this offense is going to look like in the post Ben Johnson era that if Jameson Williams comes out and looks like the player he looked like over the second half of the season, if he does that to start this year, he's a guy that realistically could ascend inside the top 10 of dynasty wide receiver rankings. Still just 23 years old. I mean, we haven't really seen him play a full and healthy season. He is a guy that if you buy now, you can still get him as a discount, and he could just shoot up the ranks. Still has youth, a good offense, good profile, everything you want to see from a dynasty wide receiver.
I'm holding on to those priors, man. Loved Jameson Williams coming out. So
I
if
traded Tank Dell for Jameson Williams and a 3rd round pick the day before the Tank Dell injury. That was I just feel bad about that one. Like I almost wanted to send the pick back and be like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I'm sorry it worked out like this.
Just send him a Christmas card. It'll be fine. I did something similar, but I had traded Jameson Williams and a 2nd for Nico Collins. And this was basically prior to both of their breakouts.
Yeah.
And the Nico thing just made me feel good.
Back to the question you said, is there one guy that you're all in on? I talked about the upside case for Jameson Williams, but Ricky Pearsall is definitely the guy that I'm all in. And as I've talked about, the fact that he was able to see the field at all as a rookie was a miracle after getting shot in the chest in the preseason. Yep. The fact that he was able to establish himself as the wide receiver 1 after getting shot in the chest in the preseason his rookie year is just mind-blowing. I tell people all the time, like, if you want to know why you should buy Ricky Pearsall, just watch the highlights from the game against the Lions last year, where he had 11 targets, over 100 yards, scored a touchdown. They were giving him screens and slants and jet sweeps. They're also targeting him deep downfield. They were using him as a red zone weapon. I think that game alone perfectly illustrates the type of long-term player he can be.
Now, I want to make sure that we're not just talking out of both sides of our mouth here, because the Ricky Pearsall thing is very similar to the Xavier Worthy thing. Like, he had big games when it mattered most, and it was late in the season. Context matters, though. Ricky Pearsall simply could not play early in the season because he was shot and he was recovering. Xavier Worthy just needed to get better at football. There's also a legitimate chance that Ricky Pearsall could be the number 1 wide receiver on the Niners. I do think Brandon Ayuk is a better player, but the opportunity for Pearsall is there to be the number 1 wide receiver. So I think the situations need context, and that's why I have them ranked so closely. I've got Pearsall at 31, Worthy at 29, just because Worthy's already 2 steps ahead, and he's got Patrick Mahomes. Right. With Pearsall, I think it's the same bucket, and given how I'm curious as to how other people are looking at him, so let us know in the comments down below what you think, but Ricky Pearsall, I think, is a guy that if the price is right, I'm willing to go out and just keep buying. Like, I don't know a lot of people that are putting a 1st round dynasty price tag on Pearsall. It's probably still just the 2nd round price tag.
Right. And maybe, I mean, if I can get I'm gonna go out and try to do that right now. I'm
Right? Yeah.
spending my 2026 seconds for Ricky Pearsall in every league I can, and hoping that I could pull one of his shares in. I think the market's probably valuing him a little bit over that, but yeah,
Yeah.
if you can get Pearsall for a second, I'm not thinking twice about that.
It's interesting because we put these guys in the lower tiers, and as I was saying it, I was thinking, you know what, the Jamesons and the Ricky Pearsalls and the Worthies, they're probably first round pick guys. Whereas I don't know if like a Chris Olave is there. I think a Chris Olave is valued differently. We just rank him higher, which
Right.
hey, that's how you indicate a buy. But
Let me
Dave, this
check
was
right now
fun.
because Olave is the 26 and Pearsall is the 34 on keep trade cut. So if we're
Okay,
saying
so
that
we're
we can get
higher.
it done for Olave with a early second, you'd think that you can get the same for Pearsall. Like I said, as soon as we finish the
Make
show,
it.
I'm going out and trying to get
Yep.
some Pearsall shares where I can.
Yep.
Alfredo, quick question. We're recording Tuesday morning. Is this show coming out on Tuesday? Because if so, I got
Yes, it
some
is.
breaking news.
Oh, breaking news. Let's go.
Bill Belichick just got engaged.
All right, that's gonna do it for us. Gotta tell you, this is it's so it's so entertaining. It is so
It's so
entertaining,
off brand.
and
Like
and
everything
I
we've known about Belichick throughout his career. I don't.
and I promise you, there's nothing I could care about less right now. Like it is, it's. I've never been in this weird dichotomy of it being so entertaining and me simply not giving an F. Like I really don't like this is tarnishing his entire brand as a not that he had a great brand as a person, but just as an NFL legend. I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
I'm happy he's happy.
There you go. You're like my wife watching sports. It's like I just hope everyone has a good time. No one gets hurt.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I feel about Bill Belichick and this
Sorry.
relationship. Just have a
I
good
just kind
time.
of wanted to see
Don't get
your
hurt.
live reaction to that news.
Genuinely do not care. Genuinely do not care. We'll be back again next week, though, as Dynasty month goes on here in the month of May. We're getting closer and closer to the redraft stuff. We're going to keep doing some rankings, keep doing some talk here about Dynasty players and values, where they should be at, and give you guys the best strategies possible. As always, we want to thank you guys for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.